We talk a lot about the importance of children's gut health on this podcast, and it's no secret that I am super passionate about this area, and that is because our kids' gut health impacts so many areas of their well-being: their mood, behavior, immunity, sleep, tummy troubles, allergies, eczema, asthma, fussy eating, appetite, and more. But have you ever wondered how your kids' gut health measures up? Well, I'm excited to announce that I'm running my very popular Kids Gut Health Masterclass. It's completely free and online, and I'd love to invite you along. I've added in a brand new How Healthy is Your Child's Gut Health assessment, where I'm going to walk you through a quick and easy process to determine how your kids' gut health measures up and what you need to focus on to repair, nourish, or maintain good gut health in your kids. I'm also going to be sharing 3 proven and easy to implement ways to transform your entire family's gut health, so you don't have to drive yourself crazy with those strict elimination diets or weird foods that your kids won't even touch. I'd love to invite you along. Head on over to naturalsuperkids.com/gut-health-masterclass to save your seat. I'll also make sure the link is in the show notes, and we have 2 dates and times for you to choose from. Come along live. It'll be interactive. There's prizes up for grabs, and you'll be able to ask me your burning questions about children's health and gut health in general. I can't wait to see you there. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast. It is lovely to have you tuning in, listening in today. We're talking all things fermented foods. And before you switch off, turn off, think, yeah, my kids are never going to eat fermented foods, please have a listen to this episode, because although fermented foods and maybe kids that are a bit fussy with food feel like an impossible match, they really are not. And I'm going to be sharing lots of practical tips and ways that you can get fermented foods into even the fussiest of kids today, and why fermented foods are so good for our kids. I can't believe we haven't actually dedicated a podcast episode to fermented foods. Now, you all know, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, how focused and passionate I am about children's gut health, and how the state of your child's gut health has a massive impact on the health of the rest of the systems of their entire body: their immune system, their appetite and eating preferences, their mood, their sleep, their behavior, and so much more. So in naturopathic philosophy, we talk about the gut being the foundation, the root of the health of all the different organs and systems of the body. And we see it time and time again in the kids that we work with here at Natural Super Kids that are struggling with all kinds of different health challenges, that when we work on the gut, we see this magical flow-on effect in improvements in all areas of their health and well-being. And so fermented foods are a part of that, because fermented foods are so good for our children's gut health and their immune health, and their overall nutrient levels, as you are going to learn in this episode. So why do fermented foods matter for kids? First of all, most kids aren't eating any fermented foods, or they don't have fermented foods in their diet regularly enough. And I think a lot of parents, maybe including yourself, might put it in the too hard basket, thinking, yeah, my child's never going to eat, a pile of sauerkraut on their plate. But there is so many different varieties of fermented foods that we can think about getting into our children. So fermented foods are a natural probiotic. They contain beneficial bacteria that support gut health. And as I said, when we're supporting gut health, we're supporting our kids' overall health and well-being. So fermented foods can help with digestion, they can help with immunity, and as I sort of mentioned, they can even help with our kids' mood and behavior and sleep through that all-important gut-brain connection. And when we're comparing fermented foods with probiotic supplements, which a lot of parents, do, and think, well, why can't I just give them a probiotic supplement? Well, yes, you can. But the difference is that probiotic supplements generally only contain one or two or a handful of a variety of beneficial bacterial species, whereas fermented foods contain a really diverse range of live cultures, plus you're getting extra nutrition in fermented foods as well. So we might think straight to something like sauerkraut, maybe, but there are a lot of different varieties and options when we think about fermented foods. So let's talk about some of the best kid-friendly fermented foods, even for fussy and picky eaters. Well, the most obvious one is yogurt. So yogurt is probably the most commonly eaten fermented food by kids, but often we're giving our kids the wrong type of yogurt. So when we're looking at yogurt as a source of beneficial bacteria, we want to make sure that we're opting for natural yogurt with no added sugar and yogurt that contains live cultures, which you'll find reference to on the tub of yogurt or in the ingredient list. And so you might be thinking, yeah, my child is never going to eat plain natural yogurt. The good news is you can add your own flavorings to that natural yogurt. So you can add your own fresh fruit. You can add a little bit of natural sweetener like maple syrup or honey, and you're still getting those real benefits. But a lot of those, kids' pouched yogurts have quite a lot of added sugar and aren't the best options. So opt for natural with live cultures if you can. Another one is kefir. So kefir is more probiotic rich, if I put it that way, than yogurt. So it's got more beneficial bacteria in it. And you can get a whole range of different kefirs. You can make your own really easily. Kefir, like a milk kefir, but you can also have water kefir and coconut kefir. Cultured Wellness, the brand Cultured Wellness, do some really great cultures to make your own coconut kefir, and this is a really good one to get into kids. So I'll make sure there's a link to Cultured Wellness products in the show notes. So you can put kefir, whether it's a milk kefir, a water kefir, or a coconut kefir. You can use it in a whole variety of different ways. You can, mix it into smoothies. You can drink it straight. So that can be a really easy win when it comes to kids and fermented foods. Now, sauerkraut or other fermented veggies are a good option. They're really a really economical option if you're making them yourself, especially. So you can make your own sauerkraut with cabbage, with red cabbage. In the Natural Super Kids Club, we have a really popular red cabbage and apple sauerkraut recipe. So for any club members that are listening, if you haven't tried that, definitely look it up. The trick that I've found with sauerkraut when it comes to my kids is to find a combination of flavors that they like. So my local farmers market, I found a cabbage and apple sauerkraut, which my kids really liked. It had some dill in it as well. Unfortunately, they don't do the apple one anymore because they were having too many issues with the ferments going wrong, I think, because of the extra sugar from the apple. But you can easily make your own sauerkraut with a bit of grated apple in it to kind of sweeten a bit. And you can play around with different herbs and spices. But the even better news with something like sauerkraut is the juice from the sauerkraut has really beneficial properties as well. So if your kids aren't used to eating sauerkraut, you can start with just the juice. Like you can mix a teaspoon of the sauerkraut juice into a dip or into a dressing or even into a smoothie that, depending on the flavor profile of the smoothie, they may not even notice. So start with a little bit of sauerkraut juice, and a little bit goes a long way when it comes to fermented foods. So don't expect your kids to eat piles and piles of fermented foods. They'll probably get some tummy symptoms, some tummy aches and things, which we'll talk about in a moment. A little bit, if they're not used to it at all, a little strand of sauerkraut. Start with that. A little bit of the juice, as I mentioned. Pickles can be a really good option for fermented foods as well. You want to look for naturally fermented pickles, not the vinegar-based kind of commercial ones. And just going back to sauerkraut as well, if you're sourcing sauerkraut and not making it yourself, you want to make sure you are choosing options that are not heat treated, not pasteurized, not bought in from Germany, for example, where sauerkraut is quite popular. So the sauerkrauts that you can find in the supermarket generally aren't the best option because they can be heat treated, which obviously is detrimental to that beneficial bacteria. So find sauerkraut at Whole Food stores or farmers markets or those small producers, which are popping up everywhere now. Another good option for kid-friendly fermented foods is miso. So miso is the Japanese ferment that you make miso soup out of. So a lot of kids will love a miso soup. You can also mix miso into spreads. It has that umami sort of really savory flavor. You can add it to soups and stir fry sauces as well. And lots of kids will really like miso. And another option is kombucha. So I know we're talking about fermented foods, but when we're talking about things like coconut kefir and kombucha, we're talking about fermented drinks. And so with kombucha, I mean, it's a bit of it's quite popular these days, and some less than ideal brands are popping up. So you want to make sure that your kombucha is really good quality. It's like low in sugar. When kombucha is being made, the sugar within the kombucha is fermented. And so even though there's sugar added to the product to make kombucha, the finished product is generally sort of lower in sugar. But again, try and opt for those smaller brands that stay true to, really, really good ingredients. Make sure you check ingredients. Things like artificial sweeteners and things can sneak into kombucha. And if you are interested to make your own, you can source a kombucha SCOBY, and you can have fun with the kids to make your own kombucha as well. So there's some really good options when it comes to introducing and including different fermented foods in your kids' diets. Now, how do we introduce fermented foods when our kids aren't used to them? So a few things I want to sort of revisit that I've already sort of talked about. Number one, start small. A teaspoon or a tiny taste is enough to begin with. Get your kids used to the flavor of fermented foods. And if you can start as early as possible, that really helps too. The older kids are, the less likely they're going to be to want to sort of develop that taste for fermented foods. Mix fermented foods into familiar foods that they already trust, they're already familiar with. So, for example, you could put some natural yogurt into a smoothie. You could put some miso into a soup that your kids already like. You could put some of the sauerkraut juice into a dip that your kids already like. And this is a really great tip for fussy kids generally. We want to be introducing new foods into foods that they already like, they already trust, and start small. Kids detect the tiniest change in foods that they really like. So start small, don't go overboard, otherwise you'll find yourself wasting food because kids will be like, hang on a minute, there's something different here. But depending on the child, also talk about the health benefits of fermented foods. And we're going to try a little bit of this in here because it powers up our immune system and it's going to stop us getting sick, or it's really good for our tummies. And you know how you've been getting tummy aches? We want to try and stop those tummy aches. And this is going to, over time, help. And so, talk to their level and get them excited about trying some new foods. Make it fun. Try a taste test challenge with different types of fermented foods. That can be good for kids that are open to variety and experimenting with food. Some kids are not going to be into that at all, and that's absolutely fine as well. And lead by example. If your kids see you enjoying them, they'll be more open to trying them over time as well. So a jar of sauerkraut in the middle of the table, you're spooning it onto your plate, you're encouraging them to at least have a little try, just have this one little strand, see how you like it, and build from there. So fermented foods can cause some upset in terms of it can upset, fermented foods can upset kids' tummies and adults' tummies if you go too fast, too soon. And so just to, I guess, talk to this point and this concern that some parents have that will they get a tummy ache? Will it upset their tummy? Depending on how much you're introducing into their diet. But some, when we're rebalancing the gut, when we're introducing these really probiotic rich foods into our kids' diets, they can get a bit of tummy discomfort, a little bit of bloating. And this is why we want to introduce fermented foods slowly and slowly build them up. And this goes for adults as well. If your child is really fussy and you're listening to this thinking, I don't think any of this is going to work for my child, focus on those milder flavors, the coconut kefir, the yogurt. Use creative ways to mix fermented foods into foods that your kids already like, and go super slow. If you can get just a little tiny drop of sauerkraut juice into a dip, that your kids like, then that's a win. And next time, maybe it's 2 drops. So just be patient, go easy. And that's really the best way to build it into fussy kids' diets. And another question that I get quite often is, how much fermented foods should my kids be having? It depends on what the state of their gut is like. If we can try and encourage kids to eat fermented foods, daily or a few times a week, that is fantastic, but they don't need loads of them. A teaspoon, is a great start. A teaspoon a day is a great start. We can increase gradually. A teaspoon a couple of times a week is a great start, going from nothing to that. So wherever your kids are at in terms of fermented foods, just increase gradually. But you don't need loads of fermented foods to get the benefits. And so a teaspoon of sauerkraut, for example, is a really good amount of fermented foods to be getting into your kids every day, or even just a few times a week. So I know I've mentioned a few different options for making your own ferments at home. I want to talk you through making your own fermented pickled ginger carrots, because this can be a real winner and a really simple way to start with ferments with kids. So what you do is you get some carrots, you peel them and you cut them into sticks. Then you bring a cup of water to the boil in a small saucepan. You drop the carrot sticks in. Let's say start with about 4 carrots. Cut into sticks. You drop them into the boiling water and you just blanch them for about a minute to soften the carrots. So then you remove the carrots from that boiling water. You keep that water in the saucepan. We'll go back to that in a second. You rinse the carrots to stop them cooking, and you place carrots in a jar with an airtight lid. And then to that water, which is about 1 cup of water, as I said, that's boiled, you add vinegar. So you add about 1 cup of apple cider vinegar. You add some sugar. So sugar of choice, I generally would use a coconut sugar or a Rapadura sugar, but you can use any sugar. So you do about 2 tablespoons of sugar, about 1/4 tablespoon of salt. Ginger is optional, but I like to put in some, like about 3 to 4 slices of fresh ginger. And then, so you add all of that into the saucepan, you bring it to a boil, and then you simmer it for a minute until the sugar and the salt dissolve. Then you turn it off the heat. And then you pour that brine that you've just made, the water, the apple cider vinegar, the sugar, the salt, and the ginger. You pour that over the carrots to fill the jar and cover the carrots. So you need to fully cover the carrots. If it doesn't fully cover the carrots, just add a bit more water. You allow to cool, and then you pop the lid on and you refrigerate. You leave those to ferment for a couple of days. So you can leave them out of the fridge for 2 to 3 days. And then you pop them in the fridge for another couple of days, up to sort of 5 to 7 days, and then they are ready to eat. And you have some really simple fermented carrots. So there's different ways that you can make fermented carrots or pickled carrots, but that's a really simple way. That recipe is in the Natural Super Kids Club. If any of our club members are listening and want a written version of that recipe, we also have a heap of other ferment recipes in the Natural Super Kids Club that you can access. But I wanted to share that one verbally with you on the podcast. First time I've ever read a recipe out on the podcast, but I would, encourage you to give those a go. And I'd love to hear how you go with those. So to recap, fermented foods are great for our children's digestive health, their gut microbiome, their immune health, their mood, sleep, and behavior via that gut-brain axis, and for their appetite and eating preferences as well. Fermented foods are super high in nutrients, so you're getting that real nutritional boost to kids' diets when you are encouraging them to include fermented foods in their diet regularly as well. Try and have fun with it. Take the pressure off. Let kids experiment with different flavors and different types of fermented foods. If your kids are into science and you have young children, there's so much learning to do to make fermented foods at home in the kitchen. If you're homeschooling, or even if you're not, that is a science lesson right there to make your own ferments or give fermenting a go in the kitchen. It teaches kids so many different valuable lessons and hopefully encourages them to try fermented foods if they have made them themselves as well. So fermented foods are one part of better gut health for kids, and I hope, but a really important one, and I hope this has inspired you to try fermented foods with your kids or increase the range of fermented foods that your kids are including in their diets. Thanks so much for listening. Good luck with your fermenting, and I will be back next week with another episode. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.